Hey there, I'm Kathy Brown, a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified personal trainer, and I love helping active women over 40 find nutrition and wellness solutions that work for your life and for your body. Today, I wanted to kind of follow up on the last video that I recorded, and if you haven't watched that, I talked a lot about how our inner monologue, or even the things we say jokingly about ourselves to friends and family, can play a huge role in how we show up for ourselves and how we take care of ourselves. It can have a negative impact on our mental health, on our self esteem, and it just can negatively impact our overall health and wellness in the end. I kind of got a little fired up recently because I was reading this forum for dietitians on women's health, and one of the dietitians commented about something about how women in perimenopause tend to become less active, more stressed, and less focused on eating well. And it felt like this dietitian who specializes in working with women through perimenopause and postmenopause was placing the blame on the women. And I wanted to scream into my computer that this is not the women that I deal with. This is not the women that I work with. They're not overeating because they're stressed, which was implied in that email. And they're exercising like crazy. They've always been active. It's a huge part of their lives. And they're doing even more to try and offset some of the changes to their bodies. And so I want to make sure that, I see you, I hear you, I understand your frustration, and I know that it's not just this dietitian. Like, I've experienced it as well, working with doctors and such, kind of being disregarded and ignored. And to a certain extent, I feel like it's kind of because they just don't know what to do. And that goes back to the fact that it was only recently, within the past 20 years, that they started doing research on women in perimenopause. And 20 years seems like a long time, but in research years, it's really just a blip on the radar. And so um, research moves so slowly that even now they don't have the extensive body of research to be able to formulate standard protocols, standard recommendations for women dealing with all of the changes in perimenopause. And so, I've struggled a little bit with, should I do this video? Should I not do this video? Because it is very personal, and I don't love talking so much about myself. But if sharing my story helps even just one person feel seen, heard, or like you're not alone, then it's totally worth it for me. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to just kind of share my experience going through perimenopause. I'm 49 years old now, and I haven't quite hit menopause, but it's I've gone through different phases of perimenopause, and so I've had experiences where I was dismissed, and I felt like I was crazy. And so if this helps just one person, if you feel like you have somebody who understands what you're going through, then totally worth it for me. So I'll start with, if I'm looking back, I probably started perimenopause in my early 40s, around 42, 43. And the biggest thing that I remember changing was all of a sudden I had extremely itchy, dry, flaky scalp. And I was working while I was living in New York. I had already decided to become a dietitian. I was in school, and I thought I was too young to be going through menopause. That wasn't even a thought that came into my mind. I just kind of chalked it up to the fact that I was living in cold, dry climate at the time. Never mind the fact that I had already lived there for 10 years and hadn't had any problems at all, but just kind of dismissed it. I also started having mild hot flashes, but again, kind of dismissed it. Started put on a little bit weight. I was in school. I was doing an internship. I was working part-time. I wasn't on like a normal eating schedule like I had been previously. I wasn't exercising like I had been previously. So again, I just chalked it up to not taking care of myself. And that very well could have been a lot of what was going on, and probably was, but I didn't even think for a moment that any of this could be hormonal. Oh, and there was this crazy thing that happened where I felt like my skin was crawling. Didn't realize that that could be hormonal until just a year ago, actually. So then over time, like these symptoms started creeping up on me. It's not like it all just happened all at one time. It really kind of slowly just started trickling in. And so I didn't even really notice it. And so eventually my scalp was diagnosed as psoriasis. Crazy. And then it spread to my elbow, and then it spread to my eye area. So kind of crazy. And that can be hormonal. Another thing that was happening that I always kind of knew came with age. I didn't really even think that it was hormonal. It was just growing like chin hair. Um, so then, after I finished my dietetics program, I moved to Arizona and the hot flashes got worse. So, of course, I just chalked that up to being in the desert. It's hot there, right? Uh, but it was when I was in my apartment in the air conditioner. So, that makes zero sense, right? But then I started getting really bad anxiety. Well, actually, at that point, it wasn't really bad, but it was anxiety that I had never had before. So, it felt troubling to me. I had a lot of fatigue. Um, I started getting into a workout routine again, and everything just felt so much harder than it ever had before. And even after being in a consistent exercise routine for a while, I still wasn't able to get to the level of performance that I had ever been able to do before. And I wasn't expecting to be able to run as fast as I had at my peak, or to be able to do the kinds of power moves that I was able to do in my 20s, but it felt like I just was dragging constantly. I was constantly dragging. And then I went to the doctor and my cholesterol was creeping up, and I was having heart flutters. And so my primary care wanted to put me on a statin, and I really resisted that. But with the heart flutters and the fact that I had heart disease in my family, deep in my family, they sent me to a cardiologist. And the cardiologist said, "No, you're very, very, very low risk. So you don't need the statin. Everything's going to be fine." Never in any of these visits did anybody ever say, "Hey, you're in your mid 40s. This could be hormonal." And so I just went about my life kind of thinking, okay, well, these are just things I need to watch. I need to work on. So I ramped up my exercise more. I paid closer attention to what I was eating. I really actually started to dive into the research because it was right around that time that I was working with women in a clinical setting, and they were in their 40s or early 50s and telling me, "It doesn't matter what I do, I'm still gaining weight and I'm so tired and I have so much anxiety." And I started to think, okay, there's something going on here. And I started to dig into research and found all of this research on perimenopause that was coming out and becoming a little more mainstream, and really started doing my research and realized that this may be what's going on with me. So I focused in on doing the things from a nutrition and exercise perspective that were recommended to help offset some of these hormonal changes that I was going through. And I was managing pretty well. Like, my anxiety seemed to be, it was there, but it was more manageable. I felt fairly normal most of the month. Obviously, during certain times of my cycle, the anxiety was worse, or I'd be a little bit more moody, or whatever, or more fatigued. But it seems like diet and exercise was doing the trick of keeping me somewhat stable, somewhat steady. Well, fast forward recently, I moved across country again. And it kind of started actually before moving across country this most recent time. It's been within the past couple of years. There have been some more symptoms that have crept up that have really kind of made it more difficult to do just normal daily things. So the anxiety became worse. No longer can control it with diet and exercise. And I know that diet and exercise is still helping. I still 100% believe that that is critical to getting through this time and postmenopausal, for wellness and longevity, and just to help feel your absolute best during this change. Um, and I know that is helping because I'm human and I have weeks where I don't do my best with my diet and my exercise. And when I don't do my best, that's when I feel like I've been hit by a Mack truck. So I know that I feel so much better when I'm doing the things that I should be doing. But it got to a point where I couldn't manage the anxiety with diet and exercise alone, and I started to get arthritic pain in my joints, in my hands, and in my feet, and I was unable to open jars. And I'm not just talking about jars that I just bought at the grocery store and were still sealed. I'm talking about jars that have been in the fridge and I've opened them a million times. Like, it was so painful just to try and twist the top. And I started losing my hair. It's thinning along my hairline. And the fatigue is much worse than before, even though I am staying rather consistent with my diet and my exercise, and I'm sleeping 8 hours a night and trying to keep stress managed and all of that good stuff. And I know I've got a lot going on in my life, and in the years past, I probably would have just said, oh, it's just because you just moved across the country and you're building a house and you just have all of these things going on. But that's not it. And I know that's not it. And over the past couple of years, I've put on quite a bit of weight, mostly in my midsection, just like a lot of women. And, I talked a lot about mindset in my last video and being kind to ourselves. And I just want to clarify that I don't think that you have to like all of the changes your body is going through. It's completely human to have things that you're not happy with. But we do have to recognize that these changes are happening regardless of what we do. And we do need to be kind to ourselves and realize that we're just doing the best that we can. And so, anyway, the escalation in the past couple of years of my symptoms has led me to really consider asking for additional help. This was really hard for me because I am a very stubborn individual, and I don't even like to take aspirin or Tylenol when I have a headache. So the idea of asking for medical help for something that up until this point I have been fairly successful at managing with diet and exercise was a hard pill to swallow, literally and figuratively. And I held off for a long time. I held off for a really long time. And finally, I just said, I need to find somebody here in my new hometown, where they're willing to have the conversation with me. And I'll back this up a little bit, because the last gynecologist I went to was when I was in Utah. And during my annual exam, I just asked her, like, I have this anxiety, I have, this is going on, that's going on. What are your thoughts on hormonal treatment? And she said, well, you don't have severe hot flashes, so you're not a candidate for hormonal therapy. And that was red flag number one. But then I asked her about doing a full thyroid panel on me. And this is a big deal for me, because thyroid is something that we can have issues with as we get older and our hormones change. And I have a video about thyroids in this YouTube channel as well, so take a look at that. But she told me, no, I just checked the thyroid stimulating, the TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, to make sure that your thyroid is functioning. Because if the other numbers are off, I don't know how to treat that. And I was like, okay, this is red flag number 2. I will not be coming back to you. So one of my goals when I got to North Carolina was to find a provider who had knowledge of and was willing to have the conversation about various treatments for perimenopause. And I just kind of want to explain, like I was talking about, the research is still relatively new. There's not a vast body of evidence for providers to have, standards of care around perimenopause. And so the providers who are going to be knowledgeable about this, they're not just anybody coming out of medical school. They're not teaching this in medical school, or at least they haven't been. And they're not teaching this in dietetics programs. They're not teaching it in nursing programs, because the research just isn't there yet. And there's such a wide variety in how women respond to perimenopause and menopause. And so the providers that you're going to find that are willing and able to talk about this knowledgeably are seeking out the information on their own. And so when I decided I wanted to get help, I listened to the audiobook of Mary Claire Haver's The New Menopause, and I highly recommend it. She is a gynecologist, so the information is coming from the medical perspective, and how she sought out the information around perimenopause and menopause on her own as she was going through her own change of life. And I was actually, even though I knew a lot of the symptoms that I had were hormonal or could be, I was astounded when I listened to her book, and I actually just started listing out all of the symptoms that I had. And I was like, okay, well, I definitely need to get help. And so I went to menopause.org and looked for a provider in my area who had gone through the menopause training. I found one, but she wasn't accepting new patients. But there was another provider in her office who listed menopause as one of her areas of focus. And so I decided to roll the dice and give her a shot. And I went to see her about 3 weeks ago, and we had a really great conversation. She was open to talking through all of my options, including, hormone replacement therapy. We talked about just going on anti-anxiety meds, which my previous gynecologist just wanted to throw those at me. And, when I said, no, that's not what I want, she wasn't willing to talk about anything else. So this provider said, the anti-anxiety meds can be very helpful for a lot of women. But in my circumstance, because I had so many symptoms that I wanted to manage, I didn't want to start going down the route of treating each symptom individually. I wanted to go for the root cause and see if that could help me. And after talking through all of my options, we decided together to try out low dose hormone contraception. So I'm basically just taking a super low dose estrogen with a little bit of progesterone birth control pill for now. And the plan is when I get to the age of normal menopause, which is around 52 years old for the average woman, she'll take me off the contraception, do some tests on my hormone levels, and if I am postmenopausal, then we'll transition to the hormone replacement therapy if needed. So I think the point of this story really is it's not just to let you know that you're not alone, and I've struggled in the way that you may be as well, and I hear you, I understand your frustration, but also encouraging you to be your own advocate. You have to. If you have providers who aren't hearing you, who aren't willing to talk to you about options, and look, hormone therapy or contraception may not be indicated for you depending on your health history, but there are other options. There are things that may be able to help you. Or maybe you're one of those lucky ones where diet and exercise do the trick. There are some women who float through perimenopause without a lot of issues, and I say kudos to you, ladies. But if you are struggling, like, seek out the information. I recommend Mary Claire Haver's book. I also recommend listening to podcasts by a researcher by the name of Abby Smith Ryan, as well as another researcher and physiologist named Stacy Sims. They have a lot of really great insight and information for women who are going through this phase of life, and specifically in the case of Abby Smith Ryan and Stacy Sims, they focus a lot of their research on women who are active. There's a huge difference in the needs, from a nutrition and exercise perspective for someone who is not currently active versus someone who has been active and wants to continue to be active and perform at a somewhat higher level than your average, semi-sedentary human. So that was probably a very long video. And, thank you for sticking with me if you made it to this point. I would love to hear your experiences. I feel like we lift each other up by sharing our stories and helping each other stay strong and get through what is actually a really challenging time. And I want you to know, like, if I can get past the idea that asking for help is failing, because that's really how I felt. I felt like I was failing if I had to ask for extra help, but I'm past that now. I know that I can't do everything. So if you need somebody to talk to, reach out to me. You can always reach me at my email at Kathy@kathybrownnutrition.com, and head on over to the Facebook group and join there to start a conversation as well. It's Fit, Fearless, and Fed Women Run the World. Just request to join and I'll let you in. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, bye.